Good afternoon, friends at Salem Lutheran. It is the 23rd day of the second month, 2021. Lots of twos and deuces there. Unfortunately, my text is from Mark 3, so that didn't work out to have any connection. But here we are. We are going along here in Lent. Lots of good things going on with the Got Change program. It's amazing what happens when we all put our quarters together. And, you take 70 people, for instance, and you start collecting that change on a weekly basis. It can add up to something significant, and the folks that Feed My Starving Children certainly appreciate that. And speaking of collection for donations, on a more local front, Neighbors is continuing to push for the Minnesota Food Share Month. Your donations are appreciated from them and from us as well. I hope that Lent provides that opportunity for reflection on our generosity. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in our lesson. Devotionals, if you'd like a devotional, they're really pretty good. I looked at them from Augsburg, and I think you'll enjoy them and find them warming and inspirational. We're also writing our own, and those are sent out with emails twice a week. So take a look at those the good folks here at Salem have written. We are continuing our series in Lent of the healing stories of Mark. On Wednesdays, I do a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the theology, the Bible study, whatever you'd like to call it, talking about the text, and then on Sunday we preach on that. And I'll tell you a little bit about that upcoming text today as well. There's lots of good stuff in those texts, and if you want to come to our Bible study on Thursday at 1 o'clock, I promise you, even though we're talking about the same text and dwelling in that same story, we'll pull out some new things in that, and part of that is your own participation in that. So join us for that. We received our surveys, and we are working on those. Thank you to all of you who gave those back, turned those back in, and we're going to be looking at them and trying to report to our next council meeting to tell what the results are and what we suggest moving forward for Salem Lutheran. The mission exploration team will use those results as well to help correlate the needs of Salem Lutheran to a new called pastor. And Moreland Elementary is in need of some things. I almost forgot that one. I'll slide that one back in here on my announcements. There's a list of things that they could use, and we appreciate your help very much in that. So, the story of healing this week is one that is not in the lectionary, and so I've been surprised at how many people are rather unfamiliar with this story. But if we don't put it in the lectionary, it doesn't get read on Sundays, and sometimes we miss over those, especially if you read the Bible in a year or something like that. There's a lot of stories you don't remember when you're doing that. This story focuses on the healing of a man with a withered hand, and the point of the story is what the purpose of the Sabbath is. And so that will be the entry point into our story. So this is from Mark 3, right at the beginning of verse 1. Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And so I stopped there just for a moment because I entitled the sermon on Sunday, Walking on Eggs. You probably know that little idiom. It means, you've got to watch what you say around certain folks, and there seems to be a sense of tension in the room, and there is certainly tension here in the synagogue. The scribes and the Pharisees are watching him closely, trying to find Jesus to slip up. And of course, curing on the Sabbath is against the law of the Sabbath. And so that becomes the point of contention. And then continue on verse 3, and he said to the man, that's Jesus, who had the withered hand, come forward. Then he said to them, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life? or kill, but they were silent. This is the key text. This is the key verse for this story. What is the purpose of Sabbath? What is the point in this holy commandment that God has given us? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. A lot going on in this story. I'll get into a lot more of that on Wednesday for you. But walking on eggs. Have you ever been in a group that you're walking on eggs with? I serve on a committee outside of the church that it's become a bit of that walking on eggs. And the thing that struck me, and it strikes me about this story today too, is in the point of the Sabbath, is to be grateful what God has given us. He has given us a day of rest. By the way, it's not an hour of rest, it's a day of rest. And to set such hard and fast rules around that doesn't help us with the life-giving principle of what the Sabbath is to be about. But anyway, we're walking on eggs in this particular committee, and one of the things that struck me is that how many of the folks said, "Well, I'm working, I'm very busy, I don't have time to do this or do that on the committee." And somebody even says, "We don't have time like people who are retired." I only know one person on the committee who's retired, so I didn't quite understand that. But as I heard them complain about their jobs, I thought in this time of pandemic, we ought to be grateful for having a good job. And they have good jobs. In fact, they have jobs that help people. And see, there's where the contention is today between Jesus and the Pharisees. The Pharisees look at this as law, as a burden. Jesus looks at it as being grateful. God has done this, has given this life-giving gift to us on the first day of the week, Sunday, as we celebrate it. The Jews celebrate it on the sundown from Friday to sundown on Saturday, of course. But the question is, for the Sabbath, is how we honor God by being grateful. That's why we take an offering on Sunday. We don't just have you mail it in on Wednesday. It's part and parcel of who we are as grateful people, honoring God, revering God on that day. As you look at this story for the coming week, I encourage you to take a look at this and to live out each character in the story. Maybe there's times when we're the Pharisees, when we're protecting what we think is the law. Perhaps we come with a withered soul, a withered spirit. A lot of people are withered from this pandemic. They are tired of the pandemic. They feel like something's been sucked out of them. Maybe we're like the disciples wondering what's going to happen next. If we step out with this Jesus, what's going to happen next to us? So play with that a little bit, thinking about that man with the withered hand. I thought I'd show you one other thing. I have this thing called tennis elbow, and here's my exercises for it. And the reason I mention this is because I know that if I don't do these exercises, my arms will atrophy. The muscles will get weakened, and the pain is tremendous. If you've ever had tennis elbow, but you've got your own aches and ailments and stuff, you know what that's about. But I was surprised at how little and how restrictive that one little pain can be. And like I said, you folks know about that too. You've got your own aches and pains, and you know how difficult that can be. So I think walking in with that withered man, we give thanks to God for we could walk in on the Sabbath too. And every week we receive healing. for our souls and our spirits. So join me again on Wednesday for our Lenten worship service. Talk a little bit more about this story. Then Sunday for the sermon. I'm going to put a little tag onto this message because I found a couple things I just thought would be interesting. So hang on, Michelle. We'll put this at the end of my message. Hey, thanks for joining me this week. Again, that's for Mark 3. Read the story. It's a great story of healing. And I encourage you to read it over and over and over. One thing we found is that the more times you read a story, especially when you read it slowly and maybe listen to it from somebody else's reading perspective, we pick up new things and nuances in the story. And sometimes we find ourselves in that story. So be still. Know that our Lord is God. This comes from the manual on my refrigerator. I was having some issues with some indicators that kept coming up, and so I started to read the manual a little bit closer. But I was intrigued that my refrigerator has this, what they call Sabbath mode. Obviously for kosher Jewish folks, and it apparently turns off the power during certain times, and you can set it for when those times would be turned off. Obviously a strict adherence to the Sabbath, and just thought that was interesting. Maybe you folks know that already, but I stumbled across that on mine and thought it was interesting. The other thing I stumbled across here just recently was, I wished I had this last week. I could have told you a little bit more about it. But this is a rendition of the house. Right here is a rendition of the house that maybe Jesus would have been speaking in, where the paralytic man was lifted up and through the opening in the roof. And so you get a sense, here's Michelle's ladder that she found. I'm not sure why she just didn't walk up the steps here, but we'll have to ask her that. Then obviously someplace here in the roof, you see how thick the roof is right there. Kind of an interesting thing. And so I'm not going to waste your time anymore here rambling on about it. You can read underneath. Just pause your video and you can look a little more in depth on that. So thanks for listening. We will see you soon. God bless.